buffoon. Oh man, he has such a low word count. He's got the grammar of a 5-year-old. He has the vocabulary of a toddler. And I said, yeah, but do you know how many people find that appealing right now? He's up there and everybody understands what he's saying. And they were like, oh, can you imagine this guy as a president? And I said, yeah, but think of how many people who for the first time are listening to a presidential candidate, understanding every single quote unquote policy that he puts forward. And sometimes that's a thing that I will call them, like elites, not even liberal elites, just people who are educated. They forget sometimes that communication is more important than your grasp of language. Can you communicate effectively with a person? That's what I learned as a comedian. I remember one time I went on a little bender where I tried to learn as many words as I could from the dictionary, and I thought I'm going to increase my vocabulary on stage. I'm going to expand my word count. My word cloud will be immense. And I got on stage and I lost half of the audience because half of the people in the audience were going, we don't know what perambulate means. Why do we have to think about this? And I realized you've got to be careful in deciding what your intention is. Are you using language, as a flourish? Or are you trying to communicate as effectively as possible with another human being? And that's what Donald Trump, in my opinion, did very, very well.
Do you find yourself code switching in the U.S.?
I do. I do, definitely, depending on where I am. And code switching is fun for me. I don't even do it intentionally. I just find speaking to one person, I change a few words, I change my tone, I change my accent slightly. It's a seamless transition that I do without even thinking, like a chameleon. I don't think that I'm doing it. I just do it.
We talked about this a little bit the last time you were on the show. Your mother married the man who became your stepfather. He was an alcoholic. He was abusive. He beat her several times. Mm-hmm. And then when you were a teenager, he shot her.
I was in my early 20s when he shot her.
Your early 20s, yeah. Okay. And he shot her twice?
Shot her twice, once in the head, once in the lower torso.
And she could have died, but it was almost literally a miracle that she survived because tell us the trajectory of the bullet.
Yeah, I mean, till this day, it's it's something we no one understands. It's the doctor used the term miracle, and he said, I hate using this term.
Yeah.
He said, I'm a man of science, I'm a doctor, I don't use this word. But he said, it's a miracle, your mom's alive. She got shot in the back of the head. The bullet went in through where the spine basically connects to the brain, but it didn't hit the spine, missed all of the nerves and the veins, and it went in the back of her head, passed just below the brain, and then on the exit was aiming for the eye socket, but it was going to come out of the eye, but it hit the lower part of her eye sockets, and the impact deflected the bullet, and so it came out of her nose. And so it ripped off one of her nostrils, but relatively speaking, the damage was really little for a bullet being shot into your head.
She was home in 4 days, back at work in 7 days. Which is kind of remarkable. But when you were a kid and your mother married this man who later shot her, judging from your memoir, you knew that there was something sinister and dangerous about him, and you worried about them getting married. You didn't want him around. And so I'm wondering, like, your mother just seems so smart about so many things. Did you lose... So much has been said about abusive relationships mm-hmm. and how it's hard to get out of them and everything. But what was it like for you as a child to see your mother making what you believed and what you turned out to be right was a terrible judgment call?
I mean, I learned, and I've come to learn as an adult, that love is a hell of a drug. It's one of the most dangerous things that human beings can have. It's also one of the most beautiful things that human beings can possess, because love, on one hand, gives you the ability to care for a human being, sometimes more than you would care for yourself. Love, unfortunately, sometimes gives you the ability to forgive somebody and blind yourself to the truth. And, I lived in a world where I didn't share the love for my stepfather that my mother shared for him. She married him, and I loved my mom. But I lived in the space where I was constantly afraid of the threats. And I don't think I can ever judge any person for being involved in an abusive relationship, especially because of the amount of surprise that it comes with. You know, anyone who's in that situation, to go from a place where everything is going well. I will never forget the first time my mother was hit. It comes out of nowhere. You don't know what it is because it's never happened to you.
Your mother, for the most part, was an incredibly brave woman, willing to defy conventions, stand up to people, go her own way, pay the consequences. On the whole, she sounds like really unflinching. And in the job you have now, you have to be that way too. You have to stand up for things and not be afraid of criticism, not be afraid of offending people when you think the comedy is correctly hitting a satirical target. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you inherited some of your mother's bravery, or that, learned how to be brave from her? And if so, like, what are the things now that you feel like you have to be brave about?
I think I was lucky enough to be in the shadow of a giant. My mom's magic dust sprinkled on me, and I hope I have enough of it to be as brave as she was and continues to be. Doing what I do now, I've come to realize now more so than ever that I have to approach what I do every day on the Daily Show with complete honesty. Funny enough, one of the biggest moments of realization was when Donald Trump won the election. Because when I came into the show, I said, I think this guy can win. This was when he first came down that escalator. He gave his first speech. And then I was like, wow, this guy's going to do well. And I remember, man, people laughed at me. People were like, oh, you silly, ignorant person who's just come to this world. You clearly shouldn't be at the Daily Show because you don't know what you're talking about. I was like, but I don't know. He seems like he connects with people. I can relate to him as a performer. I can see what tools he's using. He's good at riffing. He's good at taking the crowd on a journey. I can see what he's doing. And people would say, and all throughout the race, and there were times when on the show I would mention it, that's why I said Trump reminds me of an African dictator. And that's where that came from, because everyone said to me, this guy he's just a fool, he's a buffoon. I said, you can say that, but I've seen this before. I have seen this before. I've seen clowns that go on to take over their countries. I've seen buffoons who end up ruling their worlds. And it came to pass, and I've just come to realize I'm going to share my point of view. Some people won't like me for it. Some people will. I will work every day to be as honest as I can, because I do believe that we are all trying to get to the same place, but various people have tricked us into believing that we are not. And I see America going into that space, and I know that in South Africa we were in that space, and we're still suffering from that space. And that was where a government very successfully convinced the majority of a population that every single person there was blocking the other people from achieving greatness in the country, only to realize that we were all being oppressed at the same time.
I want to ask you another question about your life. We've talked about how race and being biracial affected you growing up in South Africa. You mention in the book